corrupção. Eu sou Manuel Vargas, eu sou gerente de prática.
The manager of global practice in governance in the World Bank, working in Africa. Global practice of governance in the World Bank is the one in charge of supporting countries in issues related with the improvements of public management, procurement, accountability, and two issues that are very important for this session. Evidently, the struggle against corruption, but also the challenge that has to do with digital transformation of the governments. As an introduction, let me tell you that it's been estimated that corruption is a crime that mobilizes $1.5 billion in bribes each year, approximately 2% of the global GDP. The damage caused by corruption impacts the poorest, reducing the quality of services and economic growth. An important trend we've been noticing in the recent years is the use of new IT and communication against corruption, and we have different manifestations of this trend. This afternoon, we are fortunate to have a panel of experts in this subject matter that will discuss this topic from different perspectives. The perspective of the use of technologies to combat corruption, from the perspective of governments, and the use of technology by the citizens to demand accountability from governments. In the case of providing services and management of resources and the use of data management. We have Francesca Recanatini, who is a financier from the public sector in the World Bank. Leonardo Sales, who's a coordinator of the Observatory of Public Expense in the General Comptroller of Brazil, and Janina Segnini, who's the director of data journalism in the School of Columbia, and she's a member of the International Consortium of Investigation Journalists. We're going to begin with Francesca. Ms. Recanatini started to work in emerging economies in the IMF in 1994 and in the institutional reform sector, IRIS, in 1995. She joined the World Bank in 1998 in the research department, focusing on the measurement of the quality of institutions. Then after that, she's worked in different countries in Eastern Europe, Africa, Latin America, and Middle East to support the development and implementation of reforms in the public sectors through the deep use of data and the formation of coalitions. So, Francesca.
Hello. Perfect. I hope that they can forgive me, all of you, because I was given 10 minutes and I'm going to do my presentation in English to be fast. All the slides that I'm going to show to you quickly are available and many more, and they will be shared with everybody. Thank you very much, because this is right after lunch and a morning that was full of very interesting discussion. I'm only going to touch on a couple of points. This is a very broad topic and a complex one. So as our chair was mentioning to us, for the World Bank, the issue of corruption is very important because it does penalize citizens. It has a problem in terms of create an obstacle for development and growth. And this is the reason why the World Bank focus on the issue of corruption. It also marginalize part of the citizen and create even more inequality in a system. So for us it's very important, and the recent technological advances that we have seen are important instrument, tools to help us to reduce and manage the risk of corruption. I'm going to talk about opportunity, and then I'm going to talk about responsibilities, meaning unintended consequences of the use of technological tool. Opportunity. When we think about tools for addressing, reducing risk of corruption, broadly, we think about these 4 blocks. There are tools that help you in terms of biometric identification that can help you to address the risk of corruption by identifying who is receiving a transfer or a benefit. There is all the issue about digitalization. They can help to empower citizens to provide the feedback, and they can really help you to understand better the problem. So let me give you some concrete example, because the bank, even if some of these tools are very recent, the World Bank has been working over the past 5-10 years, and we have been supporting countries from all over the world to really introduce some of this tool. And the difference, if I may, between my presentation and my colleague is more of a global overview, what you will receive from me, and then I'm going to learn from their direct experience of what they are doing that is incredibly fascinating. So when we think about biometrics, we think about tools that can really help us when we are trying to make sure that there is no abuse in the process of transferring resources and someone else receiving the resources that were intended for someone else. And biometrics is a tool that is increasingly being used in many circumstances to actually be able to make sure that public resources, money of the government, activity of the government, are going where they're meant to be going. And it's also a way to make sure that civil servant, public officials are not abusing of their position. Let me give you a quick example, and I wanted to show you this. This is one activity and project that we have supported in India, very far from here, but many public officials were paying the social welfare benefits to citizens, and in the process, they were taking part for themselves. So citizens, instead of getting the regular payment, they will get 80%, 60% of it. Through this type of smart card and biometric identification, the government was able to reduce this. This is a very positive example. I also wanted to mention 2 other examples that we have supported very much along the same approach to make sure that the resources that were intended for certain group of citizens, in Pakistan in this case, and Guinea, they really went there, and they helped the government in this case to identify the potential ghost worker and manage better public resources. The other aspect that I mentioned of tools, technological tools, is digitalization. Why is it important? Because corruption comes from the discretionary power of a civil servant to be able to make a decision on who is getting what, how, and when. And if instead the interaction is with the computer, it's obvious that we are reducing that risk. So digitalization in certain transaction can really help to reduce the risk of corruption. Here we have very much, Latin America is full of examples of e-procurement systems, so I went very far away to come with a different one. And here is from Bangladesh, and it really helped to actually bring in also the civil society to monitor then the implementation of the public contract that they were awarded. It also, this technological tool can help, as we are going to learn more, to really create a much better dialogue between the government and its citizens, or rather, the people living in the country. Why? Because they can offer feedback and help the government to monitor whether the road is being constructed, whether the teacher is in school, whether the doctor is there or is in a private clinic. Many of this have been happening. Many of this new technology have helped us in many, many countries. And here I'm just showing you an example where the World Bank supported a system and application that went on the telephone and helped to actually to ensure that the project that the government was implementing were on track, following a feedback from the citizen that they were there monitoring this. And this is, again, a very positive use of the technology. We also can use technology to understand better the problem. What do I mean? We now have a lot of information, and artificial intelligence and data analytics and this new ability that we have can help us to identify if there are connection, trend, that at the human eye, they will not be immediately evident. So here, you start to see, for example, let's go back. You start to see the possibility of seeing connection between firms by looking at many repeat bidding process, for example. And you start to see if always the same firm is the one losing by a little bit, pretending to be a real competitor and not really being a real competitor. And here, we can really use this tool to better understand links between different firms and reduce again the risk of corruption. So, 2 minutes left. So it's all fantastic. I'm out of job. We resolved the problem of corruption, right? And here is where I wanted to pause. And I wanted to share another story that a colleague of mine shared with us. When I was invited to this conference, I tapped into a large community that we have at the World Bank and asked them for experience. And this colleague told me this very interesting story that took place in Kenya over a period of 10 years. What we do, we introduce there very much a payment system that eliminated the use for cash. So you just had a transaction that didn't happen in cash. You had this little booths that you could go, make your payment, and the payment will reach whoever was intended. Now, what happened, and this happened for many years, it seems to be a positive use of the technology. What we discovered under a few years, after 5 years, we kept hearing allegation that someone else was using the system, and it wasn't just for good intention and good payment. It turned out that for all the booths of this initiative called M-Pesa, close to police offices, the police was controlling the booth. Junior officer will use this to then transfer payment to more senior officer. And so they had, this was very fast, done very well, very efficient. So actually it helped to increase bribery payment. Now, the story is not all negative. Clearly, this created an opportunity. Someone saw a weakness in the system and took advantage. However, the use of technology allows us to keep track, have records of this. That's how we discovered it. And to actually then, more than 350 police officers were fired based on this, which is my last point. When we use technological tools, these are tools that are applied in a system, and an institutional system in country where you still need a foundation of accountability and transparency to be able to reduce the risk of corruption. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, French.
Dos pagamentos digitais. De ferramentas para combater a corrupção. Tecnológica também pode. Agora passaremos a discutir.
Now we're going to discuss some of these applications in detail. And we're going to begin with Mr. Salles, who's the main data scientist of Public Expense Department in Brazil that combats corruption and improves the public service through data science. and they carry out highly relevant studies in the area of corruption prevention and follow-up to governmental policies.
Vou prestar em português. Muito obrigado por terem comparecido aí após o almoço. Bom, o foco da minha apresentação é mostrar algumas experiências que a Controladoria Geral da União do Brasil vem desenvolvendo na última década, no sentido de criar ferramentas e aplicações tecnológicas com uso intensivo de inteligência artificial para combater a corrupção. Meus slides não estão aparecendo, mas tudo bem. A ideia de utilizar a inteligência artificial para combater a corrupção é a busca pela eficiência. Essa é a questão central da utilização desse tipo de ferramenta. Não existe nada que a inteligência artificial faça, a priori, que um ser humano também não consiga fazer, sendo que ele vai conseguir fazer a um custo maior e a um tempo mais demorado. Então, o conceito principal é a busca de eficiência. Então, diante dessa necessidade, a CGU criou, por exemplo, vou dar alguns exemplos aqui de aplicações, que eu tenho apenas 9 minutos, de inteligência artificial. Uma delas é o modelo de risco para empresas que fornecem para o governo. Então, o governo tem essa relação com o setor privado, as empresas fornecem serviços para o governo, e o governo precisa medir o risco dessas empresas apresentarem problemas. E é possível medir esse risco da mesma forma que os bancos fazem, no que se conhece como credit scoring, para medir o risco de tomadores de empréstimo. Então, uma pessoa que vai tomar um empréstimo de um banco, ele preenche um formulário, informa algumas características da sua vida pessoal e profissional, e a partir daí o banco consegue calcular um risco. Como é que ele faz isso? Ele olha para o passado dos empréstimos pretéritos, e a partir desse passado ele consegue identificar a melhor maneira de diferenciar, ou quais variáveis melhor contribuem para diferenciar os maus tomadores de empréstimos dos bons tomadores de empréstimos. Agora sim. A equipe de ciência de dados da CGU é o que dá suporte a esse tipo de trabalho. Então, a gente tem basicamente 3 grupos de profissionais trabalhando. No meio desse slide, você tem a equipe de gestão de dados, é o pessoal que é extremamente necessário para dar carga nos dados, fazer a limpeza dos dados. Grande parte do trabalho de inteligência artificial consiste em você ter uma base de dados confiável, e esse trabalho demora muito tempo. E tem a equipe efetiva de análise de dados. E a equipe de análise de negócios, que eu vou tratar mais adiante, que é a equipe que tenta fazer a ponte entre o conhecimento prático da realidade das auditorias com o conhecimento necessário, técnico, para o desenvolvimento das ferramentas. Esse modelo de risco de empresas que eu citei, eu tenho um exemplo aqui bem peculiar. Imagine uma empresa que foi criada em 2002, em 2004 começou os negócios com o governo, de repente começa a aumentar vertiginosamente o volume de contratos, chegam a 30 milhões em 2014, em 2015 a empresa abandona todos os seus contratos e é punida pelo governo. Olhando mais de perto, a gente vê que a principal atividade da empresa era a venda de ambulâncias. Mas também ela registrou venda de caminhões, calendários, aluguéis de veículos. O nome da empresa é Construtora Emporium, e além disso, o que ela fornecia de verdade era mão de obra terceirizada. A gente também consegue observar que, ao mesmo tempo que a empresa vinha aumentando o faturamento junto ao governo federal, ela vinha reduzindo a estrutura, o que também é um indicador interessante. Outro indicador interessante é a quantidade de alertas que já eram emitidos pelas equipes que monitoram contratos dentro da CGU. Então, são 3 indicadores que, olhados isoladamente, dizem um pouco sobre o risco da empresa, mas se a gente olha em conjunto, por exemplo, a partir de um modelo de regressão logística ou de redes neurais, para aprender quais variáveis melhor determinam o risco da empresa, a gente consegue chegar a algumas conclusões interessantes. Por exemplo, o volume de valor doado em eleições aumenta o risco da empresa apresentar problemas. O número de atividades que ela registra também aumenta o risco. O número de empregados diminui. Outro trabalho interessante, agora não falando de dado estruturado, e sim de dados não estruturados, vamos falar aqui de imagens, é a identificação automática de empresas de fachada, a partir das imagens da empresa que podem ser obtidas, por exemplo, por imagens do Google Street View. Então, nós construímos um modelo de inteligência artificial que calcula a probabilidade de uma empresa estar localizada numa área comercial ou não. Esse foi o primeiro trabalho realizado. Como se constrói um modelo como esse, a partir de uma imagem? Se você olhar uma imagem bem de perto, você vai ver que cada elemento da imagem, ele, na verdade, é um vetor de informações, é um conjunto de informações. Uma imagem ela é composta por cores, e essas cores estão distribuídas em camadas. Então, quando você consegue transformar um dado não estruturado, como uma imagem, em um conjunto de dados estruturados, como vetores, você consegue utilizar ferramentas de inteligência artificial para aprender padrões e detectar anomalias. Uma das técnicas mais utilizadas são as chamadas redes neurais convolucionais. Eu posso detalhar um pouco mais depois. O primeiro passo desse modelo foi a criação de uma nota de risco para a empresa ser classificada como área comercial ou área residencial. A gente está, no segundo momento, desenvolvendo uma melhoria nesse modelo para identificar não apenas isso, mas também diferentes cenários, do tipo, olha, área comercial, área residencial, terreno vazio, estrada e etc. Dessa maneira, a gente consegue identificar esse tipo de situação. Isso aí são casos reais de empresas e seus faturamentos com o governo federal, e aí está a localização das empresas. É muito comum no Brasil a ocorrência das chamadas empresas fantasmas. Esse modelo ajuda a gente a criar algum red flag para identificar esse tipo de situação. Outro modelo utilizando imagens visa identificar creches. Vocês estão vendo, a creche é uma escola para crianças pequenas, né? Vocês estão vendo a escola aí na foto? Não, mas eu bati o olho, olhei, o primeiro olhar eu já consigo identificar. Por quê? Como o programa de construção de escolas do governo federal brasileiro é um programa único, ele determina o projeto da construção. Então, a construção sempre terá o mesmo formato. Se tem o mesmo formato, a partir de imagens de satélite, a gente consegue verificar a existência ou não de uma escola, como você está vendo aí mais de perto. Então, nós construímos um modelo para analisar e encontrar automaticamente, em larga escala, as creches que foram construídas, né, em tese, que foram construídas com recursos do governo federal brasileiro. Agora também, outro tipo de dado não estruturado, e que é um grande desafio para você trabalhar com inteligência artificial, são os dados textuais. E aí eu vou falar especificamente aqui de denúncias. A CGU, ela recebe diariamente, mensalmente, centenas de milhares de denúncias dos cidadãos relacionando alguma situação de possível fraude. Como é que a CGU consegue analisar um grande volume de informações como esse? E tomar uma decisão se vai realizar uma auditoria ou se tem alguma coisa de valor realmente naquela denúncia ou não. Então, nós construímos uma aplicação que identifica objetos no texto da denúncia. Então, nesse exemplo aí, eu consigo identificar nomes que estão citados no texto da denúncia. Ou identificações do cidadão. No caso brasileiro, a identificação principal chama-se CPF. Então, é possível se identificar a identificação de algum cidadão que está sendo citado dentro da denúncia. Ou um número de órgão público, ou um número de um contrato, ou o CNPJ de uma empresa, no caso, a identificação de uma empresa. Tudo isso é possível identificar automaticamente, porque a aplicação consegue ler o texto da mesma maneira que um ser humano faria, mas em larga escala e a grande velocidade, e identificar esses objetos. Uma vez identificados os objetos, nós podemos agregar informações à denúncia. Então, nós temos uma denúncia que originalmente é só um texto não estruturado, e nós podemos agregar diversas informações para identificar esses objetos e trazer outros elementos à denúncia. Por exemplo, se eu identifiquei a identificação do cidadão, eu consigo descobrir se ele é dono de alguma empresa que tem contrato com o governo. Se eu identifiquei o CNPJ, eu consigo descobrir quanto que aquele CNPJ já recebeu do governo federal, se ele já apresentou problemas anteriormente. Tudo isso é agregado e, a partir de um dado não estruturado, eu chego num conjunto rico de informações estruturadas que facilita a análise por parte dos auditores da CGU. E temos 2 auditores virtuais. São 2 bots, dois robôs, que fazem um trabalho similar ao que o auditor tradicional da Controladoria Geral da União fazia. Um deles é o Barnabet, a Barnabet, é um código que lê diariamente o Diário Oficial da União, que é o diário onde são publicados todos os atos públicos do governo federal, em busca de situações do tipo nomeações de pessoas que não poderiam ser nomeadas, porque já foram demitidas, por exemplo, por improbidade administrativa, então eles estão impedidos de assumir novos cargos do governo federal, a identificação de contratos com empresas punidas, a reintegração de pessoas que já foram demitidas, tudo isso são objetos de interesse da CGU e que, tradicionalmente, um auditor, pessoa, ser humano, faz esse trabalho. Mas agora um robô está suprindo essa lacuna. E um outro trabalho muito conhecido é o Alice, que é uma aplicação que lê diariamente editais de contratações públicas para identificar direcionamento no texto do edital. E, a partir daí, emitir alertas para que a CGU possa atuar. Esse trabalho foi desenvolvido em conjunto com o Tribunal de Contas da União do Brasil. Eu fico por aqui, muito obrigado. E nas perguntas a gente pode detalhar um pouco mais algum assunto que seja de interesse. Obrigado.
Muchas gracias.
And it's good to know the governments are investing on these very advanced units. As a person that has a professional profile in the case of auditing, but I'm worried about virtual auditors in terms of my labor security, but we'll talk about this later. Now I'd like to present Janina Segnini, and she's the director of the Data Journalism program of the Columbia University. Up until February 2014, Ms. Segnini led a team of journalists in La Nación Journal that is well known in Costa Rica. The team was totally dedicated to publishing stories by visualizing public databases. She also actively participated in the Panama Papers project, and her work has received different awards. Thank you, Manuel, and thank you, Crecer, for the invitation. I started out as a research journalist almost 30 years ago, and along the way, I ran into the data as a way to empower research journalism and to do things I couldn't do in the past. This is more or less the process of a research study using data, and I'm mentioning this because sometimes people feel that data journalism has to do with numbers or charts or animation, or that they're interactive. But the process begins from the generation of information and verification in the field. In other words, data lie just as people, and that's why it's very important to continue on this process. There are many ways to begin designing a research project by using data. You can begin with a very special case of something that went wrong and then expand the search and look for patterns in other cases based on an individual thing. We can also begin analyzing large volumes of data to find patterns and arrive at specific data. Let me give you some examples of something that seems to be very abstract. Something else that I've used and I'm doing quite a bit now that I lead an international lab, it's going from pieces of information to creating intelligence. If you just have a name, you have a piece of the data. If you put many names together, you're going to have some knowledge. If you add age, this will increase the knowledge on this population. And if you're able to state hypotheses that are valid based on this information, we can discover what's known as intelligence. In the case of journalists, it's a story. So let me show you 3 examples of how in public procurement some of the tricks that we've used to investigate corruption with very lengthy databases. One of the most common practices is to create shell companies, as our panelists mentioned. And this is very difficult. In Panama Papers, we saw a totally unknown world of shell companies and holdings that are like Russian dolls. One company owns another one, another one, another one. 2 years ago, I was investigating Donald Trump's businesses. Let me share that experience later. It was very complicated when we arrived at a company in Cayman, and we couldn't continue from there. Sometimes telephone numbers, addresses, patterns like the notary public that carried out the transactions. So if a company created 3 companies in different jurisdictions and with different individuals to participate on a contract and to guarantee that the owner will definitely win the contract, sometimes they make a mistake or use the same notary public or the same address. And these are things that you analyze massively to understand how they belong to a group. Something else that I like to do, I also, apart from teaching in Colombia, I train journalists in the world in the use of these techniques. And what I like to do is take data contracts and cross this information with the companies and the record of the companies. So if you see patterns, like a company was created 3 months before, before the RFP, this is a red flag. Then something else is mapping the people and relatives. When I started investigating, I wasn't clear how important it is, and for auditors, it's complicated. But journalists have the advantage that we work on a large spectrum, and you can't investigate a person or an individual that involves people in companies without including relatives. To date, all of the corrupt families put everything under the names of their children or spouses, and then use mapping networks to find these connections. Let me share some of these cases. This is prophylactic journalism. We create a database with all of the candidates to mayors, and we cross the databases with rulings, debts with the government, and people that had been disqualified from public positions. And there were 27 that couldn't, and in spite of this, they were candidates. And there were some angels that had up to 10 criminal sentences for extortion and others. This is the publication that had a map. Then we did this at the level of candidates running for office. And it's the same principle. This is an old example. We took the tax information that is confidential in Costa Rica, with the exception of land taxes. We took all of the ministers and congressmen and their properties and those of their spouses, and we crossed this information with the actual property value, and the result was that half of the ministers were not paying property taxes, and the worst of all was the Minister of Finance, because he wasn't paying anything, or his wife, and so he had to quit. And this is another example where we started with the database, not the idea. We took databases on sick leaves in the public sector that can take a sick leave and get all of the salary. And what you see here is a timeline. You see that there are some peaks, And these are cyclic. All public servants get sick when kids are on vacation and over Christmas. But there were two peaks we couldn't understand. And because I don't play any football, we were trying to understand the context of what was going on. And so a coworker arrived and said, these are the dates where the national soccer team played during the World Cup. This is not so critical, but it tells a lot about how data can be used. And finally, in this lab that I lead in Colombia, we work with partners around the world, and we decided to create a unique database starting from scratch with all of the businesses of Trump in the planet. We took over 125 variables, and the idea was to understand patterns that we very quickly began to see. For instance, most of their partners they were criminals, not in many of the countries. We also understand the business model. He doesn't invest a cent. What he does is he licenses his name. We saw their patterns, like children go first to do the business. They always meet with a politician at a high rank. And an interesting pattern is if he sent Ivanka, it was more likely that the business would pan out rather than Eric. These are some of the publications that we made with partners New Yorker, Republica. On all these patterns we found. We did entity extraction from all the books he's written. He didn't write them, of course. And also, we took entities to cross them with the data bases that we were using. This is another example how to use data, and it's the sanctions to North Korea. We took data of imports and exports to detect what countries and where sanctions were being violated. And then we took a list of all ships that have been sanctioned, not only North Korea, but also Iran. And we found a pattern of where they register these boats that are tax havens in the ship world. And this work is not mine, but I'm in the global jury of data journalism. And this caught my eye because what they did was a journalist began to follow recycling, but she quickly realized there were two cities where recycling had dropped substantially, and found that the same company was covering and that they were declaring containers as contaminated to charge double for the recycling service. And she found organized crime that was penetrating the decisions in the city of Chicago. Thank you so much. Thank you, Janina. Another fascinating presentation. I have to say, as Costa Rican, the work of investigation journalists in this country has been fundamental in the struggle against corruption. And Janina has been an amazing journalist in this area, in particular using data science to support these investigations. Now, we'll be asking questions to the different panelists to go deep in some of the topics. We can begin with Leonardo. As you showed in your presentations, the possibilities of the data analysis techniques open corruption doors that are very impressive. Can you explain how the use of these techniques have reduced the cost of investigating corruption, and how specialists have integrated with more traditional auditors?
Bem, Em relação a diversos processos de auditoria que tradicionalmente eram
In
feitos
regards to the different auditing
pontualmente,
processes
o
that were
grande
done
ganho foi que a gente passou a
traditionally,
fazê-los em larga
the
escala. Então, por
big
exemplo, a auditoria
earnings
sobre
that
contratos públicos,
we found at a
em que se
large
buscava, por
scale,
exemplo,
public
inconsistências em relação à
contract auditing, where
licitação,
we looked for
problemas na
consistency
licitação de
in
conluio
regards
entre empresas e
to
tal.
awards
Esse tipo de situação pode
and
ser agora
the
investigada
relationship among
em larga
companies.
escala.
All
Então,
of
nós não olhamos
this
uma amostra de contratos, nós
situation
olhamos
can be
todos os
investigated
contratos
at
do
a
governo
large
federal
scale.
a qualquer
So we
momento para
just
a
don't see
verificação
one
desse tipo de
contract,
situação.
but all of the
Então,
contracts
isso
at
dá um
any
grande ganho
moment to
de
verify
eficiência, como eu
these
falei.
situations, and this
A
is a
questão
gain in
do
efficiency.
auditor tradicional, na verdade, o auditor tradicional ele é parte
The
do
issue with the
processo
traditional
de automação.
auditor, they're a
Porque sem
part
o
of the
conhecimento do auditor
automation
tradicional, você
process,
não
because
consegue
without the
transcrever
knowledge
para um código
of
de
this
computador
person, you can't
aquilo
transcribe
que
for
você
a
precisa
computer code
encontrar. E mais importante,
that
você
you
não
need
consegue
to find.
validar
And
se
the
o que
most
você está
important
encontrando
thing
através
is
de
you
cruzamentos
can't
de dados
validate.
ou através de um modelo estatístico, ele de fato está te trazendo um resultado bom ou não. Então, o auditor tradicional ele é parte do processo. Ele não precisa se preocupar de que ele vai, eu vou perder o emprego, vou ser substituído por máquinas. Eu acho que a questão não é essa. Na verdade, o auditor tradicional ele pode se dedicar àqueles pontos da auditoria onde uma máquina não consegue resolver e é onde é fundamental a condição humana de interpretação e de análise racional das informações e das situações que estão sendo investigadas.
Muchas gracias, Leonardo.
The examples of research journalism using data analysis are very encouraging. However, in an era where citizens receive a lot of information as well as misinformation through social media, there's a risk that unfounded pieces are qualified as non-serious journalism. How do you approach fake news to take away the prestige of serious investigations? Let me begin by the optimistic part of my answer. The good thing about fake news is that finally somebody put a discussion on the table of credibility and how important it is. And I feel journalists, that those of us that don't make a lot of money, the capital that we have is credibility, and that it's demonstrated throughout a career trying to be rigorous in everything. That you didn't value before, people at least understand that there's a risk of having fake information, and they're beginning to make these big questions again. Specifically, there are different organizations, people that are doing different things. Lots of journalism types have emerged to do fact-checking. Many are working hand in hand with Google and Facebook because these platforms realize that they needed journalists. In Myanmar, I don't know if you know, there's a conflict that was activated by social media, and many people died. They had to hire journalists so that journalists would assist in prohibiting and curing information. And also, technologies being applied to identify, for instance, in Brazil, many colleagues with the presidential elections analyzed all of this false information to try to find the origins, and political parties are using. And one of the things we want to do is use a multinational investigation on data companies in technology and political advisory that are working in Latin America to provide services to Cambridge Analytica. And what do we need to do? Investigating it using technology. Thank you, Janina. Francesca, the World Bank launched a COFTEC initiative that transforms the public sector while focused on the public sector, on the individual. How did you use innovative technology in this case? And in such a sensitive topic like corruption, how is it that the World Bank, the IDB, and international agencies can support countries, again, in such a sensitive issue?
Let me start from the second part and then go to the first part because they are related. And I think that the starting point is something I was sharing with one of the colleagues that I met today. When we think about corruption, we think about how power is allocated within the government. There is no other way. Someone has power to distribute services, to make decisions, to hire people. And because of that power, can choose to abuse the situation, the position that has. This create, if we understand that corruption is how power is allocated, then we understand how difficult it is for anybody to support any type of transformation. But as Janina was, I'm also an optimist. And I think that actually we can do a lot to start to change. Clearly, from the point of any international organization, focus on development and growth, like I was mentioning, not to tackle this problem, defeat the whole purpose of what we do. And so the World Bank has been working over the past 20 years, supporting on demand different government and different around the world to introduce as a starting point the framework, the institutional framework necessary. In some cases, there are not the right laws or there are gaps. That's step one as a foundation. And then to support the implementation of the laws and the regulation. Because you can have a law, but if nobody implemented or follow it, it doesn't help. And in parallel, also the capacity necessary to implement those laws and system. Now, and I'm coming to your first question, this clearly has to be done in collaboration with the country. And I want you to reflect on my choice of words. I didn't say the government, I say the country. When we think about corruption, we think about something that involves multiple people. There is a civil servant, there is a citizen, a business person. So when we think about a solution to reduce the risk of corruption, we need to think about a solution where everybody is involved. And in this case, some of the examples that I shared with you before that use this technological innovation to facilitate the involvement of different groups, either business people that can have a more transparent and easier process when they do bidding with the government, and they understand why they were not selected. They understand the process and the fairness of it. Of citizens that can help the government to monitor what is happening. Of the government itself, that in the implementation of the laws that they have introduced, they use a system that facilitate a transparent and accountable implementation of the laws. And I think that here, again, this is once we think about laying out the foundation, thinking how to implement it, all this technological innovation and this technological initiative that we have can really help us at the implementation stage to make sure that this is a solution that is implemented by everybody and that really is for the benefit of the whole country.
Muchas gracias, Francesca.
Make a comment on the fake news? Sorry,
Sure.
because this is, I couldn't help but to reflect while you were talking about fake news, about something else that we often don't talk when it is corruption. I'm so optimistic and so happy to hear the discussion about fake news, but I would like to push to also talk about ownership of the media. It's not only the quality of the news, it's also who own the different media, the channel of the TV, the newspaper. And this is actually an area that is completely opaque. If we go and look at the ownership throughout the world, there is not one unique data set that will tell me who owns the most important TV channel and newspaper in OECD country or somewhere else. And I think that this is actually very important because information these days, as Janina was suggesting, is critical. Thank you.
Thanks for fair and balanced intervention.
Yes. So I already started to answer the question when I tried to elaborate how we support government and country by establishing the foundation. Clearly, we need to balance and to understand what are good opportunity for us to share experiences and knowledge that we have accumulated in the fight against corruption. I wanted to share with you one story that comes from this region. I supported the implementation of in a country of income and asset disclosure collection of the forms and evaluation and monitoring. We went to visit the agency responsible, and they had this fantastic office where they had all the form. They had collected the form, they had validated them. When we asked them what they found, they say 99% of the civil servant submitted the form and the form were complete. And I say, okay, and then, and he say, we are done. So from their point of view, the technological innovation had made the process very fast. We checked that every civil servant submitted the form and that they were fully and duly completed. But there was no cross-reference with database, for example, for the catastrophe, or with the motor vehicle authority, the equivalent to see how many vehicles really they own, with other sources of information. So the technology had helped, but only to a point. And there, it took us a while to actually create the space to actually say, and the ability for this agency that had the mandate in the country to do this work, but to actually to be able to collaborate with the other agency in that country to establish good communication so that the work was happening, there was an intelligent collaboration and sharing of information. So technology helped, but we didn't have the culture there to do that. We were much more focusing on the compliance. The form was submitted, we have done. And to change that took a much longer process of explaining and providing support and establishing connection with other parts within that country.
The world as we know it has nothing to do with the world 20 years ago. And that's why solutions have to be different, thought out differently. There are three fundamental aspects. One, that this is multidisciplinary work. The fact that we're here coming from different walks of life is huge. It's refreshing to listen to how in different fronts we're all working towards the same goal. So we can't be isolated, and there should be more spaces, and we should work with colleagues and other disciplines that are applying technologies with the same purpose. This has to be collaborative, and we can't work in isolation. If you research journalists are looked at or perceived that they're smoking and drinking a lot of coffee, and that they're in isolation all the time. That's the idea of the research journalists, that they were very secretive and everything. A modern one has to collaborate. It's not that my sources or this or that. Panama Papers was great because it's 400 people around the world. And the third point is we have to think that everything is globalized in the world, especially corruption, organized crime. So it's not possible that we want to attack it without having a cross-border mentality. And the last thing I wanted to share, in our world, there's a lot of training so that journalists can begin writing different stories. But what happens is media only send junior journalists because they think that when they listen to the word algorithm, people are scared because it sounds very complicated. And what I think and what I've been discussing with colleagues is why don't they send the editors, the senior journalists, and for training, for people to understand. And I remember when the microwave came out in the market, and this was like a revelation. I stared at it for one full day. And if you don't know that a microwave exists, you can't use it and continue heating in the stove. So why can't an editor move around in life, transferring this to the world of governments and companies? How can a decision maker walk around in life without understanding that there's a microwave? You don't have to build a microwave, but you have to understand that it's there to be used and make smarter decisions. Because if people steal money ways in technology, because it's not many people understand, so they sell very expensive camels that are not implementing true solutions.
A Francesca e a Janina explicaram muito bem essa questão da
Janina
compatibilização entre a evolução tecnológica e a cultura interna das organizações que utilizam
the use of technological resources and the internal culture that uses technology.
Que é a questão
And
da
I'd
cultura
like
da
to
própria
approach another aspect,
sociedade,
which is the
que faz parte
culture of
desse processo,
society
no meu caso,
that is a
como órgão
part
de
of this
auditoria.
process. And in
O
my
principal
case, as
cliente
an
do órgão de
auditing
auditoria é o
body,
cidadão,
the main client of
que tem o
ours is
serviço
the
bem ou mal prestado
citizen
pelo governo.
that has
Então, algumas
a
questões
good or
do
bad
uso da tecnologia
service
precisam
provided
ser
by the
discutidas do ponto de
government. So
vista
the use
cultural
of
e ético.
technology
Tem um exemplo
has
de um
to be
algoritmo que foi criado
discussed from a
nos Estados
cultural
Unidos pelo sistema de
perspective.
justiça para tomar
We
decisões
have an
relacionadas
example in the US that was
a se
created to
liberar
make decisions.
incondicional um preso ou não. E o algoritmo aprendeu basicamente que a questão demográfica era o relevante, ou seja, se o preso, independentemente do crime que ele cometeu, estava localizado, ele residia em determinada região, ele não deveria ser liberado. E isso acabou se tornando uma questão racial. Basicamente, o algoritmo aprendeu por questões raciais. Então, eu queria complementar, tentando fomentar que deve ser discutida essa questão da cultura, da legislação e da utilização desses algoritmos do ponto de vista legal é que muitas vezes o país ele está preparado para utilizar a tecnologia, mas ele não está preparado para absorver as consequências do uso da tecnologia. E isso se reflete em leis, na utilização pelo sistema de justiça e etc. Muitas vezes, o que eu percebo é que as pessoas, ao ter conhecimento de uma nova tecnologia, vamos pegar um exemplo, blockchain, os órgãos públicos, as organizações, eles meio que se comportam como: eu tenho um martelo em mãos, vou procurar um prego para utilizar esse martelo. Muitas vezes utilizam tecnologia que não é necessária para a realização daquele objetivo. Investem demais para utilizar, para poder dizer que está utilizando uma nova tecnologia, e eventualmente aquilo ali poderia ser feito de uma maneira muito mais eficiente. Isso também é outro ponto que envolve a cultura interna das organizações no uso da tecnologia. É isso, obrigado.
Isso.
Participants, if any one of you would like to ask questions to any one of the panelists.
Thank you, Manuel. Yes, it's a question mainly about data analysis and the use of artificial intelligence to detect corruption. How do you deal with the risk of non-detection? Because it may be one of the biggest risks when you do some massive data analysis, that the big fish or the medium fish goes through the net without being detected.
Quando você lida com esse tipo de algoritmo de aprendizagem, é possível você parametrizar o algoritmo para evitar a não detecção. Na verdade, você sempre tem que tomar uma decisão, se você vai priorizar a detecção ou você vai priorizar evitar a não detecção. Quando você prioriza evitar a não detecção, você acaba assumindo que grande parte dos seus resultados vão representar falsos positivos. Mas, a depender da situação, é o que deve ser feito, porque o custo da não detecção é muito maior do que o prejuízo de se detectar algo incorreto, né? Um exemplo que nós fizemos recentemente foi a mudança do sistema de avaliação de prestações de contas, de convênios, são transferências do governo federal para as entidades locais, os entes locais, em que o ente presta contas, mas a avaliação das prestações de contas é muito custosa e muito demorada. Então, nós automatizamos o processo. Para isso, criamos um modelo. E esse modelo ele penaliza bastante a não detecção, porque nós entendemos que, já que estamos utilizando um algoritmo que já economizou bastante tempo e dinheiro dos recursos públicos, nós não podemos assumir esse risco da não detecção.
Question for the Brazilian speaker. The use of information in the case of the risk model that was very interesting gives information that can be used preventively. If you detect that this entity can be characterized as a shell company, or if you detect some matches, just as the one Janina mentioned, and then there are situations that when we determine that something irregular, and there's an important investment governments make, some technological mechanisms, but how effective can they be when making actions, when they detect situations in a hiring process that the awarded person should be detected, or if you detect irregularities or complaints, or if you knew that this person before the award was a high-risk company, that this person is allowed to continue participating, and if it's at the end, is it sanctioned, or does it happen, as in many other times, that you as a journalist can move forward with information and you could do it with data analysis, but when you look at the consequences, to feel that we as citizens see the return to the investment and avoid the risks? Do we have concrete results? Do we have a metric of the value of this sort of investment?
Obrigado pela pergunta. Existem diversas maneiras de abordar, de atuar quando você utiliza modelagem de risco. Se a gente está simplesmente utilizando um modelo preditivo do estilo credit scoring para calcular, mensurar o risco de uma companhia, apresentar futuros problemas, nesse caso você não pode impedir a contratação. Legalmente você não pode impedir a contratação. Então o que se faz é informar o gestor que é responsável pela gestão do contrato que, diante de vários contratos que ele precisa acompanhar com mais cuidado os contratos de determinada companhia, porque ela oferece um maior risco por ser muito similar a outras companhias que já apresentaram problemas. Mas se a gente identifica situações determinísticas, como as apresentadas pela Janina, como, por exemplo, uma empresa que não tem estrutura alguma, não tem funcionário, ela está numa localização onde outras companhias também habitam a mesma localização, existem grandes indícios da empresa, na verdade, são empresa fantasma ou empresa de fachada, nesse caso você pode sim evitar a contratação. Mas para fazer isso, você precisa que a informação esteja disponível para quem decide de maneira muito rápida. Então, nesse sentido, nós construímos um painel que fica disponível para os pregoeiros que fazem os contratos, e sempre que ele, a partir do momento que ele conhece quem são as empresas que estão competindo, ele já conhece também alguns indicadores de risco dessa empresa. Alguns, quando são muito graves, podem levar a uma diligência presencial e aí a interrupção da contratação. É possível se fazer. Agora, quando você detecta tudo isso depois que a contratação já ocorreu e, por exemplo, a contratação da empresa fantasma, na verdade, tem muito pouco a ser feito em termos de restituição financeira para o governo. Quando o problema já aconteceu, o que se consegue fazer é a punição administrativa ou a abertura de um processo penal para o servidor, se houver responsabilidade direta por parte do servidor, ou a tentativa de uma restabilização civil por parte da empresa, mas normalmente os processos são lentos e não geram grande retorno. Então é difícil medir depois que o problema já acontece. O nosso foco é muito na questão preventiva, de evitar que problemas ocorram.
Yeah, my question is, it has to do with, I guess, what everyone on the panel is talking about. In many instances, financial crimes, including corruption and fraud, they exist. At least in our minds, we believe they exist. But there may be no data in the traditional sense to pinpoint either the nature of the fraud or the corruption or the existence of the fraud. How do you go about investigating that type of scenario? I think, Leonardo, you touched on that to a certain extent, but very often you don't even see those pictures from a satellite.
So let me start, and I'm sure that my colleagues will have something to add. I'm going to share with you the experience of how we work at the World Bank when we have that type of gaps in our knowledge. And often what we have done in countries that have come to us and say, we really are in a moment of crisis, and we need help to change and address this issue of corruption, is actually we are trying to pull ourselves, with the collaboration of the country, data together through a variety of means. Both the existing institutional data coming from different sources of information, other organizations, data coming from journalists that have already invested a lot of time, and new data by talking to the people that are actually affected by the problem of corruption. So both the citizen, the business people, but also the civil servant. And not asking about what do you think? Do you think that your country is corrupted? But actually going through the specific transaction problem that there are in the country and say, are you trying to buy a piece of land for your new business? How long does it take you? How many steps you need to do? How many times were you asked to pay something? Was anything in addition to the official payment requested to you? And I think that in that process, we try to complement very different information to get a better picture for when we do not have information. And I would also like to go back to the question that was asked before about the risk of non-detection, because this approach clearly can leave some gaps in our understanding, and maybe we advise the wrong information. Many of the technological tools that now we have available often make us think that we can rely on the technology to identify the problem. And maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned, or I come from the previous generation. So I think that, to me, I'm the first one to get involved into looking at every data that I'm using and to understand the pattern, the trend, and understand the gaps. Many times when we collect data, we get gaps. People that don't respond, region, provinces that don't provide institutional data. That, in my mind, is a red flag. The program might not catch it, but so what I'm trying to say is we always need to use the tools and then use our own experience and our own ability to go beyond the simple pattern and trend to discover what there might be behind that. And that's what reduces the risk of non-detection also.
2004, when I was in charge of the investigation unit here in Costa Rica, we investigated a series of public procurement that ended up with 3 former presidents accused for corruption. One of these cases was a bidding with a Finnish company that supplied medical devices or medical equipment to the Social Security Institute that purchase equipment for all public entities. I had been investigating this contract for 2 years, looking at all of the documents as if I was an auditor, looking for irregularities, and everything was perfect. We knew there was something wrong, but it was not until a real estate agent that didn't get a commission paid one of the bribes, she told us everything from within, and we start to rebuild it. And I'm telling this story for one reason. Based on this, I opened my eyes and realized that the world is much more complex than just looking at data and making a checklist of formal issues. And this is what I call transparent corruption. In this case, a law had been passed within 3 days to be able to buy the equipment to the only company in the world that could give equipment that had 59% finished components. So of course they were going to win the RFP, but corruption was made transparently. I was never going to find any irregularities, and that's why everybody approved it. All of the auditors saw it, and it was not until we saw the parallel world where relatives, the cab driver that tells you, and I believe getting to this dimension, it's not something, the illegal aspect of it, but you have to see it from a more integral perspective. Thank you so much to our panelists.
Só para complementar, o que ocorre é que o corrupto ele também vai se atualizar. Então, a lacuna entre o que você consegue obter através de cruzamento de dados ou análise e o que está acontecendo na realidade, ela sempre vai existir. Porque quem é corrupto, ele vai buscar se atualizar e fugir das auditorias computacionais que possam ocorrer. Por isso que é importante inserir conhecedores do negócio dentro do processo de automação, para que essa distância seja sempre muito pequena e que sempre vale a pena investir em análise de dados e que sempre consiga um resultado melhor do que se não o fizesse. Obrigado.
So before breaking, and thank you to our panelists, a few minutes ago, I said that in the case of Costa Rica, my country, research journalism has played a fundamental role in the struggle against corruption. Another institution that has been critical in this struggle has been the General Comptroller's Office. And given that we have the honor of having Marta Costa, General Comptroller of the Republic here, I'd like to ask her to share a few words to finish our session. Thank you and congratulations. It's been enriching listening to you. It's very interesting, and I believe that for all of us in the world of prevention and detection of corruption, technological innovation is a big challenge, and this has revolutionized the way in which we need to do things. We can't continue working as we did 4 and 5 years ago, and it's no secret that corrupt people are much more sophisticated than us always. And this is an opportunity for us to get ahead of ourselves. We have to invest, train, and understand the world changed. The issue of research journalism from the general controllers, we've seen it as an opportunity to complement this struggle that we all have to make against corruption every day. So congratulations. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with the TCGU in Brazil. We've had a very good relationship. We're even training part of our staff with them. And they've gone to Brazil because we have a big data project. We've taken our first steps. The report that we recently drafted and that Amelia Jimenez will share on fiscal evasion was a very good report made through big data and some interesting work in terms of public bidding. So thank you so much. Thank you, Doña Marta. Now to finish, I think we have some tokens of appreciation for our panelists. They're not bribes, okay?